My name is Gina Day. I am interviewing James A. Damico in Fairhope, Alabama, March 15th, 2011, as part of the Veteran History Project. Jim, tell me about your early years and where you were born.
I was born in Syracuse, New York, but that was during the Depression, and then my dad was working for the WPA, and then he found out that they were hiring down on Long Island in an aircraft factory, and he went to work for Republic Aviation back in 1941, and so we moved to Amityville, Long Island, and that's where I grew up, and went to school at St. Martin's Catholic School, and then to high school I went to Amityville High.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters.
Oh,
I'm the oldest of the group, and all my brothers have served in the military, but I was the first one to go in, and then one of my other brothers went in the Army later on. He went to Germany, and my middle brother, who lives in Milton, Florida, he went into the Army also, but he went to Korea. He was in what they call the Army's Navy. He ran an LCD, and he said by the time he got there, the war was just about over, but he said they forgot to tell the North Koreans that, and he got fired on many times, so he said we were always ducking for cover, so to speak. And then my youngest brother, Jack, he went in the Air Force after he finished high school.
Well, how old were you when you joined, and what service did you serve in?
I went in the Navy, and at that time, as soon as you turned 18, you had to register for the draft, which I did, but I still had a half a year of high school to go through, so I did that. And after I graduated, I went to, I knew that the people were being were being drafted, so I said I'd better get going. So I didn't want to go in the Army, so I decided to enlist in the Navy. And it was 4 months before I got called up to go. And when I went the very next day, right after my birthday.
Where did you have your training in?
I went to Bainbridge, Maryland. They just opened that naval facility, the basic training camp, and we were with the 84th Company, and that got there, and that was very interesting because you could still see where they were still renovating it, getting it back up to par, because during World War II it was a major training station. So that's how we did. And once I finished that, I wanted to go to school, and they told me I made all the tests. I did the test, and I was accepted at school, but they said, no, we need you on the aircraft carrier. Besides, the rate you want and the school you want to go to is all filled, so you can't go now. So I did, and I went aboard the USS Wasp, was assigned, and I went there in August of '51, and I was a plank owner. In other words, just before it was recommissioned. And and I was assigned to the boatswain's division, chipping paint and what have you, which I didn't really care for that much. But I kept asking my division officer if I could transfer up on the flight deck, because that's where I really wanted to be. And so I kept pestering him, and I finally got a transfer up there. So, and that's what I was doing up there on the flight deck. I was a plane handler, or they used to call us plane pushers, and that was an exciting time up there. And then the Wasp went to we had to load up on ammunition, which we did in Gray's Inn Bay and Brooklyn, and then we went down to Norfolk, Virginia, and picked up our planes, went down to Guantanamo for our shakedown cruise and training, and came back to Norfolk, and we stayed there until I guess it was June. Let's see, it was in March, and from there we got assigned to the Sixth Fleet. We were in the Sixth Fleet, and we were headed towards the Mediterranean, towards our Mediterranean cruise. And unfortunately, on the way there, we did some training on the, for flights and what have you. We had a lot of exercises going on. And unfortunately, one of our plane guards, which was the USS Hobson, cut in front of us as we were going to turning into the wind to pick up our planes, and we cut it right in two.
Oh, that must have been awful.
It was. We heard a lot of yelling and screaming. There's a lot of ironic things that went on. First of all, it was bad weather. It was at night, and my duty was on the flight deck because I was assigned to pick up, to be on the flight deck at that time. And as we were turning into the wind, we noticed that planes have port and starboard lights. Well, the red lights, we could see the planes, and they were going one way, and all of a sudden we saw a red light going this way, and said, "What's that for?" We didn't know what it was, and all of a sudden boom, we hit it, and the thing sunk in 4 minutes. So, and of course, here's another ironic part. It was done it was April 26th. It lost 176 men. It happened at 10:26 at night, and the number on the Hobson was 26. So these sixes were all there, and that was kind of. We thought about that afterwards, and that was pretty bad. But when I said we had bad weather, the storm was there. But what happened after we sunk the Hobson, the oil calmed the sea, so we were able to pick up some of the survivors. The problem was we couldn't see them, because even though we had the lights on them, they were covered with oil. And what we pulled some of them up. They told us to dump all our life rafts off so they could get on them, and several of them did that. But one of the other destroyers picked up some of the survivors. So I think there were about 40 survivors, 46 survivors. And so we went back to Bayonne, New Jersey, because we were damaged. One of the things that was kind of scary was that all our planes, because we had 4 planes up, we had to move all the planes forward on the front of the flight deck, up on the bow. And what happened was that these were all gassed up. They all had their ammunition in them. And why we didn't have a fire, we don't know, because there were sparks flying all over the place. And we finally moved a lot of the plane. We finally landed our planes, but the problem was that we had our bow was crushed. So, but fortunately, our damage control group did a marvelous job, because they reinforced the bow as quickly as they could, and because we still had to pick up our planes. So after all this was done, because the planes were starting to run out of fuel, they even radioed us and said that they were getting very, very low on fuel, and they had to land. So they finally, the damage control group did a marvelous job in reinforcing the bow of the ship. It was crushed all the way to the one bulkhead away from the officers' quarters.
Goodness.
So that's one of the things that and so we finally turned around and picked up our planes, and then turned right around again and headed back to Bayonne, New Jersey, stern first, for a while. It was just ironic that the way those things all happened. Aboard our ship, what we'd lost our all the ammunition for the 3-inch 50 guns that were on the bow. We lost all our anchor housing, and the worst part about it is we lost all our toilet paper. So what did we do? We used officers' paper napkins the rest of the way, and we sort of laughed about that. But a lot of the fellows who in my division and some of the other people who picked up these things, it stayed with us for quite a while. So, but anyways, we got back to Bayonne, New Jersey, and we said, "Oh, good, we're going to be here for a while. Yeah, we'll get some good liberty. I can go home because I lived on Long Island. No problem." Well, at that time, the Hornet was being recommissioned up in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, And so what they did is they cut off the bow of that and barged it down to the Wasp, and we had a brand new bow on our ship within 10 days, and we were back out at sea again, going up to the Med. So we had, and we were kind of disappointed about that, but you know, duty calls, and that's where we were going. But anyways, we got to the Med, and we did all our things, and one of the things I forgot to mention, when I was aboard ship, I was a plank owner, which means you know what that was. That was someone who just, you know, was right there with the commissioner. Anyways, we had an itinerary. We did Gibraltar was our first port of call, and then we did a number of them. We had I brought an itinerary because I couldn't remember all the places we were. We hit Augusta Bay. That was our first port after Gibraltar. That was in Sicily.
Is this the first time you've ever traveled overseas?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it was exciting.
Yeah.
I took advantage of everything I could, you know, because I wanted to see everything. And so then we went to, after Augusta Bay, I did a tour of Syracuse, which is Syracuse in Sicily. And I tried to find a place. My grandmother lived in, or was born in Medina, Sicily, and I didn't get a chance to go, but I was came close. It was too far away for me to get, you know, some extra leave to go, so I couldn't do that. We went to Genoa, Italy after that. We couldn't go on Liberty right away because you could see where we were anchored. You could see they had a big communist demonstration going on. They were waving their red flags all over the place, and they were screaming at us, and we couldn't hear them. We just knew it was a loud noise. But that lasted a couple of days, and then after that was fine. So we went. We had some liberty there, and I enjoyed that because most of the times the Liberty boats drop you off right at the ports, and of course by the time you get from there to the city itself, you got to go through a lot of waterfront bars and what have you, and that wasn't for me because I didn't do a lot of drinking at all. So I was very fortunate. I had this other fellow and I went to a restaurant for lunch, and it was Sunday, and this family was sitting nearby, and they invited us to dinner, for lunch rather, and we had a great time just talking. And that's the kind of thing I like to do, see the museums and the sites. That's what I was there for. And from there we went to, let's see, Marseille, France, and that's when I took my trip. I took basket. You know what basket leave is? What they do is that they assign you have to sign a leave chit, but what they do is they put it in a basket, and when you come back, they just tear it up and throw it away. So you're never charged for leave. But anyways, I went to Paris and stayed there for 3 days, and I had I did a lot of sightseeing there. Went to the Louvre. Of course, I went to the Folies Bergère. But I saw my first opera at the Paris Opera House. I saw Aida, and that was exciting too. Again, I wasn't the only one who did it. A number of the fellows who were with me liked to do those things, and I said that's what I thought it was all about. And we also went to the Palace of Versailles, and enjoyed that very much. And so it was all exciting, you know, seeing those things. And then we went from Genoa, or from Marseille. We went to another one in France. Yeah, I can't remember. That was part of it. There was only one stop in France. Then we went to Greece, and there's an interesting story there because on our way to Greece, we actually went through. They had war games, and we were involved in that with a number of countries, and so that was. We didn't get much sleep because the flight quarters were going on all the time. And so it was just one of those things. First time I ever went 36 hours without any sleep because that's what we had to do. But once we did that, it was over with. We were cruising. We went to, headed for Greece. And problem was, well, it was hot. I'll say that. It was really hot. And so they called swim call. we never heard of this before. Swimming, everything, but it was great. We all got in our bathing suits and, got on the deck edge elevator ready to jump off because they shut the engines down. Problem is, they forgot to put them in reverse to stop us. So a lot of guys jumped in right away, and all of a sudden, they were way back there. We almost lost them, but they had to put over some Liberty boats to go get them because, and I said I wasn't about to do that because I knew the ship was still moving. So, but those are kinds of things that I remember a lot. Anyway, from there we went to Greece. I went to Athens, saw the Acropolis, and visited a lot of the sites there, and that was fascinating too. And from Greece we went to Turkey, to Istanbul, and I got a chance to go on liberty there. I went to the Blue Mosque, and Istanbul was fascinating because it was a Muslim country, and you can go across the bridge. One time you were in Europe, and next you were in Asia Minor. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I never thought about that, but when we got there, we thought, gee, that's great, that's interesting. And from there, we went to Crete, Suda Bay, because that was our recreation time, and we spent some time, about 2 or 3 days there, and they gave us baseballs and gloves, and we could have all kinds of stuff going on. And of course, they had lots of beer and a cookout. Beer was terrible because it was, it was Carling's Black Label, and we think it was left over from World War II because they had all kinds of gunk in it. We didn't drink that beer anymore. And then from there, we went to, we had some problems with our one of our catapults, so we went to Malta. And it was very interesting in Malta because a couple of guys I went to high school with and was in Scouts with, their family was from Malta. So when they knew I was going aboard ship and they knew where I was going, they said, well, they gave me some things to bring to their family. And I looked them up and found them. And it was great. We had a great time. And they even had we even had open house aboard ship, so I could bring them aboard ship and show them all the things that I did and just take them throughout the ship. And they were very, very excited about that. So that was one of the nicest things we did too. And then from there we went to Sicily, and we went to Palermo. And it was interesting there because it was an escapade because I rented a motor scooter, and this other fellow and I drove up. We knew that Lucky Luciano he was, exiled to Sicily and in Palermo, and so we drove up this mountain to get up there to see if we could get to see him. Not that we would, but we got up there, and there was a guard behind a gate. He had a rifle and everything. I said, "Oh my God, what's going on here? Let's get out of here." And Mickey, who was this friend of mine who went up there with me, this guy started talking in Italian, and Mickey said, we can't understand Italian, we're from Brooklyn. Hey, what are you, paisano, are you from Brooklyn? He said, yeah. So we started talking to him. I said, we wanted to see Lucky Luciano. He says, nah, he wouldn't want to see you guys. He said, get out of here. So we did. We went back down. We found out later, after we went aboard ship, that there was a directive said that we couldn't run any motor scooters. We didn't know about that. We did it before they did it. But we had a good time doing that. And then we went to Toronto. I didn't go. That was the tip of Italy. I didn't go ashore there because we were only there for a day. And then we headed back to Gibraltar and headed towards London or Plymouth, England. And we spent some time in London, which I also enjoyed, and saw the sights again, Buckingham Palace, and all that kind of thing, Piccadilly Square. And then we went up to what we call Operation Mainbrace, which was up in the Arctic Circle. And all of us who were up there became what they call blue nosers. So we all had these little certificates that gave us, telling us that we were blue nosers. So we enjoyed that, but the problem was it was cold and the seas were very, very rough. In fact, the flight deck was 75 feet off the water. We had waves coming over the flight deck, and we had to launch some planes up there, and we had to keep making sure we had to hose down the deck because it froze. I mean, the spray of the water just froze up our deck, so we had to keep that. So it was pretty slippery trying to get these planes launched, and that was interesting. It was exciting. I mean, I was a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid, and all of us were in that age group, and to us, it was no big deal. We thought it was a lot of fun. And from there, we came back and we went into Gurks, Scotland, and we went to the Loch of Clyde, I think it was, but it was beautiful. I mean, Scotland was just a gorgeous country. And then we headed back to, after that, we headed back to the United States, to Norfolk. And we got back there in October, and one day they called us all up, called our crew up on the flight deck and said, all right, we need some folks to go to these different bases, and so they started picking out guys. And one thing I was told when I came in the Navy, never volunteer for anything, so I didn't. So I just stood back and let them in. And finally, they needed one more guy to go to Guantanamo, and the petty officer looked at me and says, "Damico, you're going." Okay, so I went. So I got down there in latter part of November, and I went into, I don't know how I was assigned to it, but they put me in the communication shack at the Naval Air Station, and I had to learn code. Well, I had nightmares about code because that's all I kept thinking about at night, and so I just bided my time, and finally, with the new division officer came on board. He was a Mustang, and we had two chief petty officers and a first-class petty officer in that office, and he said, "You guys out." He says, "I want you to, be supervising the guys out in the radio shack." So they were looking for a volunteer to go in the office, and I said, "I'll go." So that's what I did, and then I stayed there, and the commander, or the division officer, we had a new Lieutenant J.G., and his name happened to be Vince Damico. I said, "Well, that's not a coincidence." And he was also from upstate New York. So I said, "How did you get in the Navy?" He says, "Well, I was in the reserves," and he said, "I was in medical school," and he said, "I was called up, for the Korean conflict." So he said, "I'm glad I'm here," but he said, I wanted to finish medical school." So, but anyways, our division officer, his name was Commander Vanderhoff, big Dutchman. I mean, he was big, and he used to play practical jokes on us. And anytime Vince and I went down to the snack bar just to get, a sandwich or something, he'd get up. We were on the second floor of the hangar, and he'd get out there and he'd yell, "Damico!" And both of us would run like hell, getting upstairs. "Yes, sir. What do you need, sir?" "I just wanted to see where you guys were." So anyways, that's how I got down to Guantanamo.
What were some of the activities you did off-duty in Guantanamo?
Well, first of all, we did a lot of scuba diving. We sort of improvised some, a couple of guys were really good at this. They took some oxygen tanks, and we did some deep sea, did some diving. And we also did just plain scuba diving with steering out of the water. We used to catch groupers, and we had the naval, at the other side of the air station was the enlisted man's club, and we'd bring the fish over there and they cook it up for us, and so we'd have, come out there for dinner. It was really great. But had a chance to also get to work in the on a part-time basis down in the not in the radio shack, but in the shop where we worked on radios for some of the planes that were there, that were stationed there. We had another division or another squadron that was assigned to Guantanamo. It was VC-10, and they towed targets for, you know, a lot of the ships that came down to train, and we heard some weird horror stories about it. But some planes almost got shot down because these guys were just learning how to shoot these things, and but that was kind of interesting. But two of the guys who worked for them worked in the VC-10. They devised the oxygen tanks so we could do some diving, and that was great. And so we did that. The one thing we used to have to watch out for, because what we did is we painted everything a dull black, anything that was shiny, because there were a lot of barracudas down there. And that's something we always, you know, we're always on the watch out for. And we saw quite a few of them, but they didn't bother us because they were just, you know, we weren't bothering them. They wouldn't bother us. But we heard some horror stories about kids who, on the other side of the bay, some of the Cuban kids who went in the water one time swimming, and they had an ankle bracelet on, and barracuda got his leg, and that was kind of scary too. We heard about that. We used to. I was always invited to go over to Caminera because some of the enlisted married guys brought their wives down, and they were just petty officers, but they weren't chiefs or first-class petty officers. They could live on the base. They had housing, but they had an apartment building over in Caminera, and so they, you know, I was invited for dinner over there, and so that was interesting. I took a little bit of liberty, went to Santiago, and that was an interesting town. And every once in a while, we'd get we had an air sea rescue plane that went into Havana, and I had a chance to do that a couple of times too. So I got to see, this was all before Castro came into power. And but it was in that period, probably in, I think it was 54, we used to hear gunfire out in the Sierra Madres because we were surrounded by the Sierra Madres. And we found out that you know, Castro was raising hell out there. And one of the interesting things that we heard rumors, the fact that we knew that at that time it was President Batista was the president of Cuba, and he paid a state visit to the admiral at that time, and we heard rumor of the fact that some of the Castro's army or whatever, the insurgents tried to get on the base, and so they were going to try to assassinate him. That's just a rumor we heard, and so whether it really happened or not, we don't know. But we did, you know, there were a lot of hobbies we could do. We had a model airplane club, which I belonged to, and so we had a lot of, you know, activities that we could do. One of the duties I had as in the division office, I had to work out the watch schedule for, you could either, this was just not for the petty officers, but for just the seamen or airmen. We had to either do mess cooking or guard duty for the around the ship's store, around the, you know, mess hall and what have you. We had a beer garden which was called the Slop Shoot, and of course you've heard of Hot Tui. You never heard of Hot Tui beer? That was a Cuban beer down there, and it was pretty potent stuff. But I mentioned the fact that this friend of mine, a fellow I went to high school with, and when he was in scouting, he was in the Navy too. He joined the Navy after I did, and he was on a tin can, which is a destroyer, and his ship came into Guantanamo, and he came on base, and we had a great time together. And I said, "Get out of the uniform. Here's a pair of shorts. That's all we wore down there." And so we had a good time doing it. I drank a little too much down in the slop chute, so to speak. And but it was interesting nonetheless. I had a great time down there. I really enjoyed it. And of course, one of the things they wanted me to do is to, you know, shipping over, and I just wouldn't do that because I had my sights set on going to college. That's what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to get a college education. And since the GI Bill was in force and people were taking advantage of it, that's what I wanted to do. And so I started writing to different colleges, and the one I really wanted to go to was Lemoyne College, which was a Catholic college in Syracuse. And but I had to take an entrance exam, which I never got around to. And in the meantime, after I got discharged, I found out that there was a new college that was opening up on Long Island on the North Shore. So I said, well, let me find out about that. So I did, and it was great. I got accepted, and most of us, there were 120 of us who were in the first class, and most of us were Korean vets. And so we had a good time. You know, we just was great doing something for the first time.
So what did you get your degree in, and when did you graduate?
Well, I graduated in 59. I was a majored in business economics, and minored in history and economics. And at that time I was working part-time in the college library, which was actually called the Trophy House. This was, by the way, the name of the college was C.W. Post College. And C.W. Post was the one who founded Post-Tosie, General Mills. And this estate was partly his, and he left it to his daughter, which was Marjorie Merriweather Post. And her daughter was, what was her name? I can't remember. Anyways, she was a famous actress. But anyways, so this estate was all, you know, we turned it into a college. We had, our classes were done in or took place in the servants' quarters, which was very interesting too, because every room had a fireplace in it, and it was really neat. The one advantage we did have, as the classes, as the college expanded, and they took, you know, freshmen coming in, if anybody, you know, acted up in class like some of these kids did, we just took them to task and said, wait a minute, we're here to get an education. We don't want to, you know, no fooling around. And so that's what we did. And I joined a fraternity, which was mostly Korean vets, and we were what they call a service fraternity. So we went out and we went to a senior citizens home, and it was a, you know, what they have now, and we painted their house, and that was one of the projects we did. So, and then after since I was working at I did part-time work in the library, and I started taking some library courses, and I liked them. And then they said, well, you know, the librarian at that time says, why don't you want to go to library school? I said, well, I can't get in library school. My grades aren't that good. He says, yes, they are. So I said, okay. So I really wasn't doing that well in college. I tried, but, you know, it just wasn't my thing. But all of a sudden, since working in the library, he showed me how to study and what things I could do. And I had all these books around me, the reference books, and all these I could get all these factual data going, and it was great. And all of a sudden, I wound up just 2 points shy of the dean's list. So when I went to, I said, where can I go to library school? He said, well, I know the dean at Rutgers University. He says, let's see what we can do about that. So I was accepted at Rutgers, and that's where I got my library degree. And it was unusual because most of the library schools gave you a Master of Library Service. I mean, a library science. Mine was a Master of Library Service, which they emphasized. And I'm very proud of that, because that's some of the things I did. I emphasized going through my career, and that worked out well for me. And then after I finished library school, I went to work at the Institute of Aerospace Sciences in New York City. And what that was, it wasn't working in the library. It was in the indexing department, which we did is we indexed magazines, you know, technical magazines, and we had an abstracting department and an indexing department, And we were under contract with Documents, I think Document Incorporated, which they in turn abstracted and indexed NASA reports. So we combined the two. So we did the publishing, the journal articles, and they did all the technical reports. So we had, and we started using computers at that time, and I was running back and forth to Washington with these computer cards, and at Documentation Incorporated, and that's we combined that into a published publication, which we've got, and also at the Institute of Aerospace Sciences. That's where I met my wife. She was a index assistant editor on one of the technical journals that we published, and so she was something else again. And we used to have we courted over, because we were right across the street. We lived at the Institute of Aerospace Sciences was in an old mansion right on Fifth Avenue, and we were right across the street from Central Park Zoo. And of course, in Central Park, they had these great big boulders that were, big things you could, it was just great. So we used to have we used to call it lunch on the rocks. We'd go over there and sit up on the rocks, and nobody even knew we were there because it was just one of those things. And so that's what we used to do, and that was really enjoyable, to say the least. And then I started my career. After that, the Institute of Aerospace Sciences merged with the American Rocket Society and became the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. So it was called the AIAA. And so I did that, I guess, about 2 years. And then I went to General Precision and became a special librarian. And they made what they called breadboard navigation system, navigation systems for rockets. So I did that for a while, and then I found out I got laid off because they couldn't get the contract. So where do I go next? And next thing I knew, at that time, when there were layoffs in any of the aerospace industry, if there was another company nearby, they looked to see if they could hire anybody, and I was hired by Thiokol Chemical Corporation, working in their library. And I did that for a number of years, and then a few years, and then I said, well, how about the university? I went to University of Dayton, had an opening for what they called the STINFO program. It was called the Scientific and Technical Information Office, and that was on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so I did that for a while, and then that contract phased out. And at the university, they said, how would you like to work in the library? I said, fine. So I did. And since I knew a little bit about computers, I was the systems librarian for the university. And went from there to, where did I go next? I'm trying to think of, we moved around a lot. From there I went to, I think it was Brown University, and from Brown I went to Rice University, and I was always at Rice. I was the assistant director there, and after I went there, because I only could go so far, I normally stayed at places about 5 years each, and because I didn't have a PhD, so I couldn't move up the ladder the way I wanted to. And then I went from Rice University to the University of Southern Mississippi as a director of libraries there. And then from there to director of libraries at the University of South Alabama, where I stayed for 12 years and retired from there. And then moved to Fairhope. And we love it here.
Have you kept in contact with any of the men that you served with?
One guy I served with, George Sonny. He lives down in Clear Lake, Texas. And the last time I saw him was about 3 or 4 years ago. And George was still fine, And I got to know George quite well down in Guantanamo, and because he worked in the shop, and when he got out of the Navy, he got married, and he knew I lived on Long Island. They were honeymooning in Manhattan. And he called me and said, "Jim, can we come out?" And I said, "My God, yes, come on out." So we saw him for quite a while, and for a few days, and then didn't see him again for a while, and then we found out that we used to communicate back and forth. We sent Christmas cards to each other, so I knew he was in Clear Lake. So we went down and saw him, and it was great to see him again. So.
Looking back on your years in the service, what did you learn from that, or?
Well, one of the things they do teach you is that you have to get along with everybody, and that's one of the things that you work is teamwork, and everything. You had to do things together. You weren't considered an individual. You just had to do everything everybody else did too, and to me that was fine. That's something I always carried with me too, and that's why I encouraged it. No matter in my career, I always encouraged teamwork. Everything had to be done together, not as an individual, but as a group, and that's bode well for me as far as I was concerned. And those were good experiences as far as I'm concerned. The Navy taught me a lot as far as that aspect is concerned, and I never had any problems with anybody. Just didn't have guys were just great, Yeah, they had personalities, they were different, but we all got along, and because we had to, we all lived together. I mean, when you're sleeping with a guy underneath you, and you're on top, and you got to make sure that, if he wants to go to bed early, or you just don't play loud music or anything like that. So you had to respect everybody's privacy too. So we had, to me, that was all very beneficial. So, and I'm trying to remember all the things that happened. Now, one of the things too, I was not in the Korean War. I was in the Korean conflict, and one of the things we tried to emphasize down in Cuba was that we were setting up standards so that everybody could, for war, and we were more like the they just had to do everybody had to do, they all had their duties to do, and special things that we had to make sure that the standards, everybody followed the same thing. And so we were sort of like the training group down there, and that's what we considered ourselves. And aboard ship, we were part of the 6th Fleet. That just happens to be in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. We were in the 7th Fleet. If I would have stayed on the WASP, which I really wanted to do, because I knew they were going to go to the Far East. They were going to go to Korea. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the Far East. I wanted to see as much as I could of the world, so to speak. Because that's what I joined the Navy, join the Navy and see the world. Well, that almost came true. I only saw half the world. So that was it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you.